They laughed before they even knew him. They whispered behind his back before he'd said a single word. And by the time he finished his first week at Brookhaven High, everyone already had a name for him. The quiet kid. The new kid. The one who didn't belong. But what none of them knew was that Daniel Brooks wasn't the kind of kid you could push around forever. From the moment Daniel stepped through the tall glass doors of Brookhaven High, he noticed everything. The halls were spotless. The floors reflected the ceiling lights like a mirror. Every locker was perfectly aligned, every student perfectly dressed. It felt more like a private academy than a regular high school. Cold, controlled, like someone had decided even the air should behave. Back home in Atlanta, things had been different. His old school was loud, messy, alive. There were murals painted by students on every wall. You could hear someone freestyling or laughing down the hallway between classes. Here at Brookhaven, the silence was almost uncomfortable, the kind that made you feel like you shouldn't breathe too loudly. Daniel's mom called the move a new beginning. His dad, ever more practical, called it a fresh test of discipline. Daniel wasn't sure which one was right. He only knew that when he walked through those doors, he could feel eyes on him. Not glares. Not open stares. Just those quick glances, the kind people give when they're trying not to be caught looking. Murmurs that fade as you walk by, half smiles that don't quite reach the eyes. He wasn't small. 5'11", lean but strong, built from years of training. Not just gym workouts, but something deeper. Precision, balance, focus. Every step he took was measured, every movement calm. It was the kind of discipline his father had drilled into him since childhood. Strength isn't loud, his dad used to say. It's quiet, controlled. It's what you do when no one's watching. But at Brookhaven, control didn't mean much. All they saw was someone different. Someone who didn't fit their perfect picture. He walked into the front office, picked up his class schedule from a receptionist who smiled too tightly, then stepped into the main hallway. That's when he saw them. 3 boys leaned against a row of lockers, laughing in the way people laugh when they want you to notice. The one in the middle, tall, broad shoulders, sandy hair slicked perfectly back, was clearly the leader. His name, Daniel would later learn, was Jake Collins. Star athlete, son of a local business owner, the kind of guy everyone seemed to orbit around. Jake's laughter wasn't loud, but it carried, the kind of sound that made you feel like it was about you even if it wasn't. When Daniel passed, Jake tilted his head slightly, studying him. Not with anger, not yet. It was more like curiosity mixed with calculation, the way a lion sizes up something new in its territory. "Yo," Jake said to his friend's voice low. Daniel couldn't hear the words, but he saw their eyes shift toward him, saw their grins widen just enough. He didn't stop walking. Didn't even look back. His father's words echoed again. Discipline isn't walking away because you're scared. It's walking away because you don't need to prove anything. So, he kept moving. But what Daniel didn't know was that ignoring Jake Collins was the one thing you didn't do at Brookhaven High. And that small decision to keep walking was about to change everything. By the end of that first week, Daniel had already learned the unspoken rules of Brookhaven. The athletes ruled the halls. The rich kids ruled the conversations. And everyone else learned to stay out of their way. Daniel, he didn't fit into any group. He wasn't loud, but he wasn't timid either. He carried himself differently. Too calm for the nervous ones, too composed for the arrogant ones. And that made people notice. Jake Collins noticed most of all. He didn't like people who stayed out of his reach. He liked control, liked reactions. And Daniel's silence, that quiet confidence, and felt like a challenge. It started small. A shoulder bump in the hallway. An accidental spill near his locker. A muttered insult just low enough that teachers wouldn't hear. Nothing you could report, but enough to test him. Daniel stayed calm. He'd faced worse before, but the whispers started spreading anyway. He doesn't talk much. Thinks he's better than everyone. Probably scared. The thing about rumors is, they grow fast when truth stays silent. Jake knew it, and he used it. A knocked notebook in class. A stolen pencil replaced with a smirk. A quiet comment that made the people around him laugh. "You sure you're in the right school, Brooks?" Jake had muttered once. Daniel didn't even look up. "Guess you're not much of a talker," Jake said again, smiling. The kind of smile that hides venom behind charm. But Daniel only focused on his notes, his handwriting steady even. The truth was, Daniel had learned long ago that words were cheap. Silence, real steady silence, made people uncomfortable, and Jake hated being uncomfortable. The days passed. The tension built, and everyone at Brookhaven could feel it. A storm quietly gathering in the halls. Because no matter how calm Daniel stayed, there's only so long you can stay quiet before someone forces you to speak another way. And when that day finally came, Brookhaven High would never forget it. By Friday, the air in Brookhaven High felt heavier. People moved faster in the halls, eyes darting between Daniel and Jake like they were waiting for something to happen. Even teachers seemed to sense it, how the quiet tension clung to every corner. Daniel noticed too, but he didn't let it change his pace. He still arrived early, still ate alone, still kept his calm, but inside, he could feel that same quiet energy, the kind that comes before lightning strikes. It was lunchtime when the storm finally broke. Daniel sat at the far end of the cafeteria, his tray neatly arranged, his mind already somewhere else. He was thinking about home, about his mom's cooking, about how his dad used to make him recite phrases from his martial arts training before every meal. Patience first, power last. He could almost hear his father's voice saying it now. Then the noise around him changed. A ripple moved through the room, like the sound of a wave spreading across a calm shore. The laughter near the food line faded, replaced by whispers, and Daniel didn't need to look up to know why. Jake Collins was walking toward him. He came with his two friends, Evan and Cole, the same shadows that followed him everywhere. Jake's grin was wide, too confident, too forced. "Hey, Brooks," he said, his voice carrying across nearby tables. "I've been wondering something. How come you never talk? You mute or something?" Daniel didn't respond. He took another bite of food, calm, deliberate. Jake chuckled. "Oh, come on, man. Don't be shy." He reached out, grabbed the apple off Daniel's tray and tossed it across the cafeteria. It rolled under a vending machine. A few people laughed, nervous laughs mostly. Others just watched. Daniel placed his fork down slowly and lifted his gaze to meet Jake's. It was the first time he had really looked at him. And that small moment, the quiet, unblinking look, made Jake's smirk falter for a split second. Then he pushed Daniel's shoulder. Hard. "Do something," Jake said. "You gonna sit there like a statue?" The cafeteria fell into silence. Chairs stopped moving. Even the buzz of the drink machine seemed to fade. Daniel sat perfectly still, breathing evenly, his muscles coiled beneath the surface. He remembered every word his father ever taught him. Control first. Always control. He rose from his chair without hurry, every movement smooth, every breath steady. It wasn't the rise of a kid ready to fight. It was the calm of someone who already knew how this would end. Jake grinned again, trying to reclaim control. "Oh, we got a tough guy," he said to his friends. "You gonna swing, Brooks? Gonna show us that attitude?" Daniel tilted his head slightly, watching him. There was no anger in his eyes, just quiet focus. And that's when Jake's confidence cracked. Something deep in his instincts whispered that this wasn't normal, that this wasn't going to end like the other times. But by then it was too late. Jake shoved him again, this time with both hands. The instant contact hit, Daniel moved. It was fast, almost too fast to follow. His left hand caught Jake's wrist mid-motion. His right hand locked around Jake's elbow. He turned, pivoted, shifted his weight, and in one fluid motion, Jake's body lifted off the ground. The sound of his back hitting the cafeteria floor echoed through the room like a gunshot. Everyone froze. Trays stopped midair. No one spoke. No one breathed. Jake gasped, shocked, trying to process what had just happened. He scrambled halfway up, eyes wide, face pale. Daniel crouched beside him, voice calm, level, quiet enough for only Jake to hear. "Don't touch me again." Then he stood. No dramatics, no glare. He dusted his hands off, picked up his tray, and walked away. The silence broke a heartbeat later. Whispers spread first, then gasps, then half-shouted stories that grew with every retelling. Someone had filmed it, everyone always filmed it. And within minutes, that clip would be shared, replayed, and dissected by every student in Brookhaven High. Jake stayed on the floor, hands clenched, jaw tight, humiliated. He knew, just like everyone else did, that what had happened wasn't a fluke. That Daniel hadn't just reacted, he had executed. By the time the last bell rang, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Some said Daniel flipped him with one hand. Some swore Jake had flown across the room. None of it mattered. The truth was simple. Jake Collins, the school's golden boy, had been taken down, not by anger, not by luck, but by a quiet kid who had warned him without saying a word. Daniel left the cafeteria like nothing had happened. But he knew better. Moments like that don't stay buried. They grow, they spread, and sometimes they come back for you. That night, as he sat at his desk, his phone buzzed. An unknown number. The message was short. "You think you're tough? Watch your back." Daniel stared at the screen, then placed the phone face down. He didn't reply, didn't even frown. He just breathed, long and steady. He had felt this coming the moment he stepped into that school, and now it had finally begun. He didn't know it yet, but the real fight wasn't going to be physical. It was going to be something much harder, because when power and truth collide, only one gets to walk away clean, and Daniel Brooks was done walking away. By Monday morning, the school felt like a different place. The moment Daniel stepped onto campus, he could tell. People weren't whispering anymore, they were staring. Some out of curiosity, some out of fear, and some with something else in their eyes. Respect, maybe. Or the kind of fascination people have when they realize the rumor was real. It was strange. 2 days ago, he was invisible. Now, every step he took echoed louder than it should have. 2 freshmen nearly tripped trying to get out of his way near the lockers. A senior he'd never spoken to gave him a fist bump in passing. Even teachers looked at him a little differently, cautious, uncertain. And all Daniel wanted was to breathe without being a headline. He didn't ask for this. He never wanted attention. But attention has a way of sticking to you once you've broken a story wide open. People were calling him things now. Legend. Stoneface. The Quiet Storm. Every nickname felt like someone else's idea of who he was. Not one of them knew the truth, that he wasn't proud of what he'd done. He'd just done what he had to, still he could feel it. The balance had shifted, and not everyone liked it. He saw Jake at the far end of the hallway, standing with Evan and Cole like always. But this time something was missing. The grin, the noise, the certainty. Jake's shoulders were tight, his jaw set. He met Daniel's eyes for a second before looking away. That single glance told Daniel everything. It wasn't over. It never was. By lunch, the story had grown again. Now people were adding their own versions, exaggerating every detail. Some said Daniel was a black belt who trained with special forces. Others claimed he could break bricks with his bare hands. The stories were wild, but no one seemed to care what was true. They just wanted to believe something big had happened. Daniel sat alone, as always, ignoring the stares. He was halfway through his meal when someone slid into the seat across from him. A girl this time. Confident posture, calm eyes. He'd seen her before in English class. Her name was Maya Lewis. "You know," she said, opening her water bottle, "you didn't just win that fight." Daniel looked up, quiet, waiting. "You embarrassed him," she continued. "Jake's not used to losing. Especially not like that." Daniel didn't answer. He kept eating. Maya leaned in slightly. "His dad's on the school board. He's already trying to get you suspended." Daniel's fork stopped midair. "For what?" he asked, his voice calm, low. "For existing," Maya said dryly. "Technically for attacking his son. That's what they're saying. They're trying to make it look like you started it." Daniel sat back, exhaled slowly. He had seen this before. Different city, different faces, same pattern. A problem starts, the wrong person finishes it, and suddenly the truth gets blurry. Maya watched him carefully. "You don't look surprised." "I'm not." "Then you know they'll try to make it stick." "I know." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Don't let them. If they're going to twist the story, you better have something to untwist it with." He looked at her for a moment, studying her face. She wasn't like the others. She didn't seem scared or impressed. Just real. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "Proof," she said simply. "Find the video. The whole one. Not just the part everyone's sharing." He nodded once. "Thanks." She smiled faintly. "Don't thank me yet. You're about to find out how fast rumors turn into weapons." That night, Daniel went to work. He found the full video, the one that showed Jake throwing the first shove. He saved screenshots, texts, messages, even group chats from classmates backing him up. Every detail mattered now. When he closed his laptop, it was almost midnight. Outside his window, the street was quiet, just the hum of crickets in the dark. He sat back, staring at his reflection in the glass. He didn't look angry. He looked steady, determined, The next morning, he walked into school with purpose. Maya was waiting near the entrance, arms crossed. "You got it?" she asked. He nodded. "Good, then let's end this." They didn't waste time. Together with two other students who'd seen everything, they went straight to the principal's office. When the meeting began, Jake was already there, with his father sitting beside him, polished suit and forced smile. The principal's expression was neutral, but her eyes betrayed hesitation. Power always made people hesitate. Jake's dad started first. "My son was attacked. He's been humiliated. This kind of behavior..." Daniel calmly placed his phone on the desk, the video queued up. "Watch." The room fell silent as the footage played. Jake's shove. Daniel's restraint. The clean, controlled counter that ended it all. When it ended, Jake's father looked pale. The principal leaned back slowly, letting the silence stretch. "Well," she said finally, "it seems clear what happened." Jake's father tried to argue, but the ground beneath him was gone. There was no case, no suspension, no punishment. When Daniel and Maya walked out of that office, she glanced at him with a small smile. "Guess control really does win." He didn't smile back, but his eyes softened. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "you just have to let the truth do the fighting for you." Jake didn't come to school for the next few days. When he finally did, he was quieter, slower. He kept his head down in the halls. The laughter was gone. The arrogance had melted away, and people saw it. They saw the difference. They saw what real strength looked like. Daniel hadn't just defended himself. He'd changed the entire balance of power without throwing another punch, but he didn't celebrate. He didn't boast. He just went back to being quiet. Because real peace never needs noise, and sometimes the loudest victory is the one won in silence. The week after the meeting felt strangely calm, like the air after a storm. Whispers still followed Daniel wherever he went, but they sounded different now, curious instead of cruel. People stepped aside for him in the halls, not out of fear, but out of some new kind of respect. For the first time since he'd arrived at Brookhaven, no one bumped into him on purpose. No one muttered insults under their breath. The noise that used to chase him had fallen silent. But silence, Daniel had learned, doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's just the pause before something else begins. He noticed it in the smallest things. Teachers watching him a little too closely. A few students whispering whenever he passed. Even the principal, who had stood so firmly in his defense, seemed to greet him with a rehearsed politeness now. Something had shifted beneath the surface, and Daniel could feel it, like a current under still water. Jake came back to school that Wednesday. He moved differently now, slower, quieter. Gone was the swagger, the loud laughter, the effortless confidence. He kept to himself, eyes low, voice subdued. But Daniel didn't mistake that for surrender. No, Jake wasn't done. He was just regrouping. At lunch, Daniel sat in his usual spot away from the noise. Maya joined him again, setting her tray across from his. "You notice it too, right?" she said. Daniel looked up from his food. "The quiet," she added. "It's too quiet." He nodded once. "People don't forget fast." Maya leaned in, lowering her voice. "They're watching to see what you'll do next. Half of them think you're some kind of hero. The rest think you're trouble waiting to happen." Daniel didn't respond right away. He picked up his fork, then set it down again. "I didn't do anything special," he said finally. "You didn't have to," she said. "You broke the rules without breaking them. People don't know how to handle that." Her words stayed with him long after lunch ended. Everywhere he went, he could feel eyes on his back, not hateful anymore, just cautious. And as much as he wanted to ignore it, part of him wondered what they really saw when they looked at him. Did they see a fighter, a troublemaker, or just someone who refused to bow? That question followed him into the next week. It followed him home, too. His mom noticed before he said a word. At dinner, she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You seem far away lately." "I'm fine," he said automatically. She gave him that look, the one that saw through everything. "Fine isn't the same as at peace," she said softly. His dad didn't say much, just set down his fork and nodded. Then, After a long pause, he said, "People will always test your calm, son. The question is, will you let them shape it or will you own it?" That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about everything, about Jake, about the fight, about what Maya had said. He'd come to Brookhaven wanting a clean slate. Instead, he'd become a symbol, a story people whispered about instead of a person they really knew. The next morning, he arrived at school early, long before the hallways filled. He liked it that way, the emptiness, the echo of his footsteps. It reminded him that beneath all the noise, the world could still be quiet. As he walked past the gym, he heard the sound of a door closing softly. He turned his head just in time to see Jake walking out. They locked eyes from across the hallway. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Jake nodded once. Not an apology, not a challenge, just acknowledgement. Daniel didn't nod back, but something inside him eased. Maybe it wasn't peace. Maybe it was just understanding. Later that day, something unexpected happened. During a group project in history class, one of the freshmen, nervous, glasses too big for his face, spilled his papers across the floor. Before Daniel could move, Jake bent down and helped him pick them up. No smirks, no jokes, just quiet help. The class went still, watching. When Jake stood again, he glanced at Daniel, not for approval, just awareness. And Daniel knew then that something had changed for real. Not in the rumors, not in the halls, but in the way people carried themselves. Jake had learned something from that fight, and maybe in a small way everyone else had too. By the end of that week, the school felt lighter. The laughter returned, not cruel, not sharp, just normal. People started talking to Daniel like a person instead of a story. Even the teachers smiled when he passed. And when Maya walked with him to the gates one afternoon, she said, "You realize you changed the whole mood of this place, right?" Daniel shook his head, half smiling. "I didn't change anything. They just finally saw what needed to be seen." She looked at him for a moment, then said quietly, "Maybe that's what real change looks like." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. For the first time since he arrived, Daniel felt something close to peace. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from knowing you didn't lose yourself trying to. Yet deep down, he also knew this story wasn't just about him anymore. Brookhaven High had learned what strength really meant. And so had he. But life had a way of testing lessons twice. And Daniel Brooks wasn't done learning yet. The next test was already waiting, just around the corner. Spring arrived quietly at Brookhaven, but for Daniel, the calm never lasted long. He could feel something shifting again, a slow pull in the air that told him life was about to test him once more. Not with fists this time, with something harder. Rumors had started to fade. People laughed normally again. Teachers had stopped watching him like he might explode. And just when things finally felt steady, trouble found a new way in. It began with a substitute coach. Coach Ramsey. Big voice, bigger ego, the kind of man who didn't like quiet confidence because he couldn't control it. On his first day, he decided to test the athletes. When Daniel volunteered to spot for another student during gym, the coach made a show of him. "Brooks, right?" Ramsey said, pacing around him. "Bet you're the famous kid I've been hearing about." "The fighter." Daniel didn't answer. He kept his eyes on the weights, helping the student lift safely. Ramsey smirked. "They say you dropped one of our star players." "That true?" Still no answer. "Cat got your tongue, son?" The coach pressed. Finally, Daniel met his gaze. "I don't fight for show," he said evenly. A few students nearby chuckled under their breath. The coach's grin tightened. "We'll see about that." After class, Ramsey cornered him near the locker room. "You think discipline makes you better than the rest?" Daniel stayed quiet. The man stepped closer. "You're not special, Brooks. You just got lucky once." He walked off before Daniel could reply. That night, Daniel thought about his father's words again. Life doesn't test your strength. It tests your control. He knew this was that kind of test. The kind where walking away took more power than throwing a punch. Over the next few days, Coach Ramsey pushed him in small ways. Extra laps, harder drills, public challenges disguised as lessons. And every time, Daniel held steady. Until Friday. They were running sprints in the gym. Jake was there too, back to his old self, though quieter now, humble in a way Daniel hadn't expected. Halfway through the workout, the coach barked, "Brooks, with Collins! Let's see if you're as fast as they say you are." The gym fell silent. Everyone knew what that pairing meant. Old history, new audience. Daniel and Jake lined up side by side. The whistle blew, they ran. Side by side the whole way, every stride matched. By the final stretch, Daniel surged forward just a hair faster, crossing first. The coach didn't congratulate him. He sneered. "Figures, show off." Then louder so everyone could hear. "You think speed makes you better? You think control makes you untouchable?" Daniel froze mid-step. He could feel all eyes on him again. The same silence from that cafeteria months ago. But this time it wasn't fear that filled him. It was calm, deep, and absolute. He turned to face the coach. "No," he said quietly. "Control makes me unbreakable." The words landed like a punch. No yelling, no defiance, just truth. And somehow that silence carried more weight than any fight ever could. For a moment the coach just stared at him. Then Jake stepped forward, shoulders squared. "Coach," he said, voice steady. "He's not showing off. He's leading by example." It was the first time Jake had ever spoken up for him. And the look that passed between them wasn't rivalry anymore, it was respect. The coach's expression softened only slightly. Then he blew his whistle and walked away, pretending it was over. But everyone in that gym knew what had just happened. A lesson had shifted hands. After class, Jake caught up with Daniel by the exit. "Guess we're even now," he said. Daniel raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For teaching me how to stand up right," Jake said with a small grin. Daniel almost smiled. Almost. "You taught yourself. I just reminded you." The two of them walked out together, the afternoon sun warm on their faces. Maya was waiting outside, leaning against the railing, her smile easy and knowing. "Looks like peace is finally fashionable," she said. Daniel shook his head, amused. "Peace isn't a trend. It's a choice." They stood there a while, watching students spill out of the building, laughing, shouting, living. The place that had once felt like a cage now felt almost human. And for the first time, Daniel didn't feel like the outsider anymore. He felt like someone who had weathered something and come out stronger. As he walked home that day, he thought about everything that had happened since he'd first stepped into Brookhaven. The looks, the whispers, the fight, the silence after. All of it had shaped him, but none of it had defined him. He realized something simple but powerful. You don't prove strength by winning fights. You prove it by staying true when the world dares you to lose yourself. Sometimes the quietest voice in the room carries the loudest truth. And Daniel Brooks had finally learned to let that truth speak for him. The story of the quiet kid who wouldn't break became more than a rumor. It became a reminder that power without control is chaos, and calm, the kind that doesn't flinch, doesn't fold. That's the real strength the world never forgets.